Hello, everyone. I think we'll get started. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. All right, welcome, everyone, to a community forum on faculty unionization. My name is Marianne Renaud. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Daily, and moderating alongside me tonight is Colin Campbell, Dr. Colin Campbell of the Pharmacology Department. He's also the chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee. And this evening's forum is really a joint effort by the Minnesota Daily and the FCC to provide a place to share information, open a dialogue about the potential vote to unionize faculty at the University of Minnesota. We want to thank Vicki Courtney, Renee Dempsey, and Brian Edwards for their help organizing tonight's event. And Jigna Desai. Tonight's event in particular, for me and for the Daily, supports our mission to provide information to the university community and to allow a place for exchange of ideas. It's going to be live streamed online, and it's going to be archived, so people will be able to revisit this in the months to come. You can, I don't know why you guys would live stream it, but if you want to look at the live stream, it'll be at the University Senate's YouTube page, and we will also be continuing to check the questions that are being submitted online. And if you would like to submit a question online, you can do so at www.mndailyprojects.com/faculty-union-forum. Like I said, we will continue to check those throughout the evening. And there will also be a time for people to ask their own questions at the two mics right here. And because this is being live streamed, we do ask that anyone that wants to ask a question from the crowd does do it at the mics so that people watching from elsewhere can hear the questions. I'm going to hand it over to Colin.
I want to also welcome you and say good afternoon. I just wanted to make a brief comment. The vibe that we're trying to have this afternoon is a scholarly conference, so while you wouldn't stamp your feet or applaud at a lecture or a conference, that the participants, the panelists were very gracious to volunteer, and their understanding is this was going to be a nonpartisan forum devoted to doing the best job that they could to provide information as well as they understood it. It's not a pro or an anti-union event, but I do hope nevertheless that it will be a very exciting afternoon, and I really thank you again for coming.
And additionally, the Daily will continue to cover this, and there is a possibility to do similar events like this, more forums, in the future. We want to let you know that tonight is probably not going to be the only time we do some version of this. What I'm going to do now is introduce very briefly all of our panel members, and then we will start with some questions that we received online. So first we have Sumanth Gopinath, assistant professor in music theory at CLA. To his side we have Mary Pogachnik. She's a senior teaching specialist in the Spanish department. Then we have Rob Stewart, a graduate student and chair of the Student Senate Consultative Committee. Then Assistant Professor Aaron Sojourner. He is in Works and Organization at the Carlson School. And we have Professor Joel Waldfogel. He is a Strategic Management and Entrepreneurship professor also at the Carlson School. Oh, and Joelle Stangler, undergraduate student body president, was supposed to be here today. She is sick, so she will not be able to join. And now we will kind of give everyone a chance to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their perspective, and then we'll get going.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sumanth Gopinath. I am, I guess we were supposed to also say that we're, a number of us have signed public statements in support of unionization. So I'm one of those faculty members. I have been involved in organizing campaigns for graduate student teachers when I was in graduate school, as well as involved in this campaign as well. And I'm very excited about the possibility of a union on campus. I think faculty have a great opportunity ahead of them. If we choose to form a union, we could, I think, make a really positive contribution to higher education in general and to the conditions of the way things look for faculty and for the broader community here on campus.
Hi, I'm Mary Pogachnik. I work in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. I've been here at the U since 2001, and I love my job. I want to keep doing my job. I've signed the public letter of support for the unionization efforts. I feel that unionizing is a way to increase trust and increase community and practice democracy here locally, and as something that will expand, ripple out from our local experience. And I'm glad to be here today.
So my name is Rob Stewart. I'm actually here in I have three different kind of roles, I think, or perspectives that I bring. I'm the chair of the Student Senate Consultative Committee currently. I am also a graduate student in the Department of Sociology, and I am actually a former undergrad here at the University of Minnesota, so I graduated from here a handful of years ago. And I don't know that I'm going to take a particular position on the University of Minnesota faculty unionization, as much as I'm going to bring up a number of questions that have been brought up, I think, by graduate students, undergraduate students, professional students, and students from throughout the University of Minnesota system. Because I think there are a number of things a number of positives that we see, or that I see out of a possible union. But then there are a number of questions as well that I think are important to be addressed. And I really appreciate the invitation to participate.
I'm Aaron Sojourner. I'm an assistant professor at Carlson. I teach labor relations and collective bargaining. I've done that for the last 7 years since I've been here. The core of my scholarship, one of the main things I work on is labor relations and the effects of labor unions, not really among faculty, but sort of broadly. I have a very unique, I think, background. I started my career as a union organizer. I did that for about 5 years. I got a master's in public policy at UChicago. I felt, everything I learned there was very challenging to all my ideological predispositions. I fell into a very intense love-hate relationship with economics there. I love the rigor. I love the empiricism, the falsification. All the conclusions at the end of these articles, though, they told me everything I thought was good was bad. Everything I thought was bad was good. So it was a very, important intellectual challenge for me. And I couldn't understand all the Greek part in the middle of the paper, so I didn't know whether to believe them. And I went and then studied for a PhD in economics. And this is my first job out of there. So I've appreciated the university and Carlson. I'm in what used to be called the Industrial Relations Center that values the scholarship on labor management relations. I think I'm the only former union organizer. Maybe I know one other with a PhD in economics, very few of us around. But I think it's given me sort of hopefully a balanced sense of some of the good things they do, but also some of the costs that they have. And so that's sort of what I bring.
So is this our moment to speak, or is this just a moment to introduce ourselves?
Both.
Both, okay.
yeah.
Did you actually want to give your talk at this point, or?
Well, I guess I'm happy to say, I guess I wanted to talk about some of the potential benefits and some of the potential risks, okay? Just to set the table a little bit. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, I did sign. I signed the, yes. And yeah, I signed on to the petition in support of unionization here at the U. And why? So I think some of the benefits are basically this. A union is an organization of workers, of people who sell their time for money. And, faculty do that. And in a union, you have more voice in the governance of the university. How does that happen? If the faculty vote for a union, it creates a duty to bargain in good faith on the administration. It moves you from a place where the administration has unilateral control over terms and conditions of employment they can delegate that power, they can share that power, and, you know, honestly, faculty have a tremendous amount of influence. We have a tremendous amount of influence over our terms and conditions of employment compared to other workers in the economy. You know, we're involved with pay setting and choosing our colleagues and in many aspects of the employment relationship. But overall, you know, the way I think about it is there's a bunch of stakeholders in the university. There's faculty, there's the administration, there's students, there's the state that provides funding. And I think that unionization would increase the role of faculty in setting the rules of the university, and I think that's healthy. It would also give us an independent voice in the state, you know, separate from the administration. A lot of times our interests are aligned, but sometimes they're not, as is true for any of these two pairs of stakeholders. You know, I think the big risks are that unions tend to flatten compensation. So, you know, they tend to bring up wages or earnings for people at the bottom more than they do for people at the top, and maybe even sort of dampen growth at the top compared to what would happen otherwise. And so you get this wage compression. So it might be harder to hang on to people at the top who are on the border between staying and going. So I think that's the big risk. I think unions have, in different contexts, unions take different approaches to bargaining on wages. You know, athletes have unions, movie stars have unions. There are examples where unions don't just simply flatten wages. So collective bargaining is a process. It's a democratic process where the faculty have a say in what the priorities are, and it's a risk that's out there, but it's one to manage.
That's it? Okay, thank you. So I'm Joel Waldfogel, and let me just say a little bit about my biases or predilections. I have actually very long ties with the university. My father was a professor here from 1955 to 1985, and actually I mention this because he attempted to organize a union on campus unsuccessfully in the 80s. So 2 drives ago, that was something he did. I mention that because I come to this question with a favorable view of the labor movement and of labor. I'm also an economist, so that means, I've learned something about how the economy works. I did study labor economics, among other topics, at Stanford. I mainly work now in the economics of industry, but I have worked in labor economics before. So I say that because I do have some relevant economic expertise. I was an assistant and an associate professor at Yale University, and then I spent 13 years at the University of Pennsylvania at the Wharton School. Now that is, of course, a bastion of capital, but I was the chair of the Business and Public Policy Department, which was a context that was tempering the role of capital. We believed in government and understood its role. So I say that because to tell you that I'm familiar with research universities, of which the University of Minnesota is one. I came here to the U in 2010, been here for 6 years, but as I say, have long-standing kind of historical ties. So I will tell you a little bit about a study I did when I got curious about this, but let me just also share with you kind of how I came to it and what I was thinking as I was doing the study. So I was, like many faculty, I guess, kind of have my head in the sand doing research and teaching and service and so forth, and I heard at some point that the SEIU is attempting with faculty to unionize the university. So I thought, well, who is the SEIU? And as some of you know, it's the Service Employees International Union, has about 2.1 million members. It was founded in 1921 in Chicago as the Building Services Employees Union, founded with janitors, elevator operators, and window washers at the time. It's expanded since then. Some of the big initiatives, if you go to their website just to see what they're up to, they are big into the $15 minimum wage, as many of us are. One of their big initiatives is the Justice for Janitors program. They have this sort of beautiful social realist art on the posters. The major areas that their membership are in, biggest area, healthcare, kind of dietary aids in nursing homes, things like that, 1.1 million if I got it right. Building services, that is janitors and security in buildings, about 500,000 or so. A big chunk of daycare workers, maybe 200,000, not exactly sure. I think university faculty are on the order of 40,000 or 2%, something like that. And if I got it straight, they don't have any 4-year, universities that are SEIU organized. So that's kind of who they are. Now, how should University of Minnesota faculty think about this? And I think there are two questions in thinking about this. First of all, what do unions do? And Aaron told us a little bit about that. And what do we do? And how do these things relate? So, and I agree with Aaron, what he said about this. What do unions try to do? They seek to improve working conditions in a variety of ways. One of those things is pay. They'd like to raise pay, and sometimes they can, particularly in private sector contexts. In universities, there's not really any evidence they can raise pay, but there is some evidence of redistribution from lower paid to higher paid workers. I mean, you can understand that because in commercial firms, there are profits to be bargained away from the owners, but not so much in especially public universities. So that's probably what's at stake here, not so much raising pay, perhaps redistributing pay, perhaps some elements of voice, as Aaron said. Now, what are we? We are a major research university. We really are. Minnesotans are said to be shy and not proud enough of their accomplishments, but we have a major world-class research university here. And if you think about, at least how I think about this, tenured and tenure-track faculty, which are one of the kinds of instructional faculty who teach here, have three broad jobs: research, teaching, and various kinds of service to the school, service to the university, service to a variety of kinds of communities, including our scholarly communities and our proximate, geographic community. And I'm not just making this up. If you look at the University of Minnesota's mission statement, and yes, we have one, and thank God it's only a page long, but it lists, three areas. Research and discovery is the first listed mission, of the University of Minnesota: to generate and preserve knowledge, understanding, and creativity by conducting high-quality research, scholarship, and artistic activity that benefits students, scholars, communities across the state, the nation, and the world. That's not the only one. Teaching and learning, and outreach and service, and they all deserve to be read out loud, but I don't have that much time, so I'll direct you to it. It's at the Regents website. Now, teaching is actually a very important part of tenure and tenure-track faculty's activities. I mean, I take teaching myself very seriously. I really enjoy it. I find it stimulating, challenging, hard, and something that I love. But it, frankly, is about a third of the job of a tenure or tenure-track faculty member. Because of the other obligations. Now, there are other employees of the university who have different responsibilities. Okay, and actually, one of the, and I don't mean to beat around the bush here. One of the major issues before, the Bureau of Mediation Services, and I think us generally, is what would the bargaining unit be, and are like elements being grouped together. And I think that's an interesting thing for us to think about. But the only thing I'll say is that there are some rather large differences between the set of tasks that the tenure-track faculty do and the set of tasks that instructional faculty who are not tenure or tenure-track. And again, I don't say that in any way to diminish the importance of the teaching activity. As I say, teaching is a very rewarding, important, and challenging aspect of what I do. I really love teaching. I love students, and I think they even like me. I won a teaching award last week. Okay, so let's talk about, what's that? Thank you. So attempts to unionize research universities are pretty new. And the University of Washington, a university not unlike ours, a big public, major, international reputation public research university, is further along in a process of unionization. And one question that prompted me to do the little research I did was the question, well, can we learn something from their experience? I really didn't know how to think about this. And by the way, I've disclosed everything there is to disclose. I haven't signed any letters in favor of or against unionization. So at the University of Washington, many faculty have publicly expressed their preferences about unionization. There's an open letter in support of unionization that's signed by, I think, about 325 faculty. There's an open letter opposed to unionization signed, last time I checked, by about 850 faculty. And so the question my research sought to address is, well, what are the characteristics of the supporters and the opposers? So I went and I collected publicly available data on, job information, including rank, measures of scholarly activity, also measures of political contributions, because I was interested in whether, how people's political views were related to their tendency to be supportive. So what do the data say? I won't give you a seminar, I'm almost done. But I think one of the big findings of the study is that the greater is faculty interest in scholarship, the less is their support for unionization. That is, if you look at measures of research productivity like ISI publications or Google Scholar citations, the higher those measures, the less likely that faculty are to be interested or supportive of unionization. Now, that's true both overall and also within department. That is, among faculty in the same field, those who are more productive are less supportive. And it's within the same field, within the same rank even. So that struck me as an interesting finding. Now, it's interesting to compare the political preferences, a little hard to observe this stuff, among sort of faculty generally versus those who are opposed to or supportive of unionization. So one thing you can look at the Federal Elections Commission website is the volume of political contributions to partisan federal office seekers. So I'll just give you a little fact here. If you look at University of Washington faculty generally, of their partisan contributions, about 95% are to Democrats. So like many faculty, university faculties, pretty, kind of left-leaning in this regard. If you look specifically at the University of Washington faculty who have signed the open letter opposing, I'm not misspeaking, opposing unionization, and you find the political contributions, you'll find that it's over 95%. Like 97% of those contributions are to Democrats. Okay, so what we're not talking about the Lyndon LaRouche party here or Donald Trump, but these are the kind of people in Minnesota who would vote for Al Franken. Okay, so what does it mean for the U? Well, we are a research university, and I don't say like it or not because I think we should love it. It's a very important feature for us. It's an engine of economic growth in the state. It's a very important thing. Unionization is a job attribute, an amenity. And what do I mean by that? Like, we build nice athletic facilities on campus so the students we wish to come here will come here. Amenities are important. Those good jobs in Silicon Valley have fancy coffee machines and ping pong tables. Those are amenities meant to attract people. If you think about unionization as a job attribute, well, what the research is showing is that it's a job attribute that's unappealing to the faculty who are more research productive, again, within department, within field, and so forth. And I guess what that means is that unionization could make it harder to attract and to retain the faculty would help us advance the first listed element in our mission statement. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
All right, so now we will start with some of the questions that were submitted in the past couple of weeks. The first of which is, this is for Rob. As a graduate student, what kinds of concerns have been raised by...
Did you identify who submitted the question, or is that private information?
Most of the questions were submitted by faculty members. I don't have the name in front of me right now.
Sorry, we tried to pick questions that were asked by multiple different people, so we didn't give attribution.
Yeah. So the question is very general. What concerns or hopes have you heard other graduate students express about the potential for faculty unionization?
Sure. So I think that there, as Joel just mentioned, there's, the several missions of the university, and I think graduate students, by and large, there's been a lot of talk about, teaching and research and mentorship, and how a union would then affect those different roles. And I think when it comes to teaching, the question for many graduate students is whether or not maybe the focus of the university will shift more towards undergraduates than it already is, right? And so whether or not resources will be focused on undergraduate classes, and then thus fewer graduate seminars or whatnot. And I think in terms of research, there are questions about this like productivity. What is the effect of productivity, or what is the effect on productivity, research productivity, in terms of grant writing and all these things that come along with the training that's involved in the graduate student process? Will there be less of a focus? We don't, or I guess I don't really know. And then in terms of the mentorship, that's another piece where that's been a topic of conversation. If a union were to move forward and be formed at the University of Minnesota, what role would that then play on the mentorship role that faculty have in graduate students' lives? Because for many graduate students, mentorship is very much a key part of that training process. So those are a number of the things that have been talked about. But then I would also say on the flip side, there is also a lot of positives that people, or a lot of the pros that people have been pointing out regarding whether if a faculty union were to be created. Going back to the teaching, many graduate students also are adjunct faculty have adjunct positions at various colleges or universities throughout the Twin Cities area. And I think graduate students can very much understand what non-tenured faculty go through, in a sense, right? And the difficulty of having to string together several classes and for not much pay. And I think there's a strong sense of camaraderie there, perhaps. And I think so. I guess so there has been a lot of questions. I think what all kind of ties this together is, what is the end product going to look like in terms of the contract and how that works? And those are a lot of questions that are still up in the air, of course.
And we'd like to extend a very similar question to Mary, who is a part of PNA. What kinds of concerns or perceived benefits have you heard within your peer group?
Within the PNA cohort, there's a lot of concern about lack of stability in our contracts. I am on a 1-year renewable contract. I can be non-renewed for any or no reason at any time. That's actually happened to me and 5 of my colleagues in a staff of 26 PNA cohorts in Spanish and Portuguese. 5 of us are currently non-renewed. That's a 5th. So that's 15 classes that won't be taught if we don't return. So that's our big concern, really, is stability in our contracts. I've been here as a PNA since 2004. I was a grad student here in 2001. And there's definitely a quality issue that happens if you're on a 1-year contract and you can be released at any time. It affects your job, and it certainly doesn't affect my loyalty to the U. I would like to stay here, and I know that my cohort feel the same way. So it's job stability, transparency and policy, systematic application of that policy is another concern among the PNA cohort.
Do you see potential benefits to your cohort? I mean, potential problems, forgive me.
To unionizing?
Yeah, things that might not be as good as they are now. I understand you're saying on balance it would be better, but...
Sure. I think that in the beginning, there are some roadblocks, I think, to negotiating a contract, and certainly once we become unionized, I think it'll be a little bit rocky in the beginning. I think it's a process, though, that will end up being beneficial to everyone, from the students all the way up to the faculty.
And Sumant, what are some of the drawbacks and potential advantages that you've heard from a faculty perspective?
Sure. In my conversations with faculty from a number of different colleges on campus, I guess I've encountered a number of concerns that faculty hope will be addressed by unionizing and union contracts. This would include concerns about the casualization of academic labor, the increasing reliance throughout, the university system and in the country as a whole, to rely increasingly on non-tenure tenure track faculty positions to do the bulk of teaching work. Another concern that's of significant interest to faculty I've spoken to include concerns about governance issues, to what the nature of the relationship between the faculty and the administration is, how that relates to what sort of authority the faculty do and do not have to be able to affect the conditions under which they work. There are another sort of thing includes what I think of as bread and butter issues, things like faculty raises, the way that our benefit plans look. And then this sort of thing also extends to a profoundly important issue, which is the problem of parental leave or better childcare resources on campus, the sorts of things that in other contexts faculty union contracts often provide resources with. There are faculty who are also significantly concerned about the sort of problem of the cost of higher education or the nature of higher education's resources and many of the things that a faculty contract and working with a politically powerful institution like SEIU might be able to benefit us in terms of, say, lobbying for resources from state and federal government. There are a number of faculty who are interested in issues concerning specifically faculty of color, and that's another sort of major concern that's come up, and some of the energy around the union effort has been oriented towards that. There's some, I know that another question is coming up, which I can talk more about that. So those are some of the, I think, general concerns that I think around which faculty think a union might be able to make a difference or an improvement. I think concerns in general, I think, have been waged in relatively vague terms, because I think faculty are concerned and don't have experience with what it means to work under a faculty contract for the most part. So things like how will a union change things? How would it make things different from from the way they are now? That's something that's come up. Is there a concern about adding an extra layer of bureaucracy to the way that the university works? That's another concern that's come up in terms of how a union might provide, what might be the detraction or problem with having a union. Some discussion of salary compression, too, that Aaron brought up is another thing that a number of faculty have raised. Those are some of the main concerns.
And we'll actually have the following question will be for Aaron to speak from his research about the possible changes that could happen. But first, we wanted to extend the same question to Joel, who's also a faculty member. So again, Joel, what are the concerns that you have or have heard about unionizing or not unionizing?
I think that there are a lot of questions about which problem it is that the unionization effort seeks to solve, because I think there are very different interests among different elements of the community, and I think people I talk to have lacked an explanation to help them understand even what exactly it is that, what is the problem that is meant to be solved, A, and B, whether the solution to that problem really would bind the tenure track and tenure faculty together with the say, the PNAs and adjuncts, or whether the unionization effort might be better addressed at the concerns of the PNAs separately.
So now we'll go to Aaron. Based on your own research, what do you know about what could change if the faculty were to unionize?
So, I mean, I'll just say this is almost just descriptive of how collective bargaining works, okay? So, in general sense, a lot of things could change. Collective bargaining is a process, so there's not a simple answer. Many things could change for the better or for the worse, depending on your perspective. And a lot of it has to do with the way the process works, but also the choices that people make in the community, on the labor side, on administration side, and together about how to use this relationship. Okay, but just like very descriptively, what happens? So like, let's say there's there's going to be some kind of election. Let's say there's an election. Let's say there's a majority who vote against the union. What happens? If a majority vote against the union, status quo prevails. If the majority vote for the union, what happens? So at that point, there's, as I said before, a legal duty to bargain in good faith on the administration to bargain over core terms and conditions of employment. So except for tenure. So the tenure standards are sort of legally exempt. The process itself and some of the details about transparency and things like that are subject to bargaining. But things like compensation processes, leave and benefits and all this stuff that we think about, working conditions, job design, teaching load, research, expectations and support, all that stuff is subject to bargaining. And, you go from a world where right now the administration sets that policy in consultation with faculty, in consultation with the faculty senate, in partnership with departments and department governance processes and school governance processes. But it goes to a world where there's a bilateral agreement. There has to be a bilateral agreement about these issues. So it's not just the administration gets decide in consultation and with the advice of faculty, but a world in which they have to come to terms, or they have to try to come to terms with the faculty through the collective bargaining agent, okay? So SEIU would represent the faculty. SEIU would set up some process to elect leaders, so the faculty could elect leaders and people to sit on a bargaining committee. The administration would pick people to sit on a bargaining committee. The bargaining committees would meet. They would hash out whatever terms and conditions they want to talk about. They would try to come to terms. If they couldn't come to terms, then they have to go to some recourse. But in most of these cases, in almost every case, they come to terms, at least in the public sector, and so, it's a process. There's not a set of specified ends or contract terms that are for sure going to be in there. It's really collective bargaining as a process where you have workers going from sort of being individually negotiating to bargaining together. And it sets up a political process among the faculty to have a stronger community voice, and it ties the fate of the faculty together more tightly, we talked about some of the things that can happen. It can affect governance. I think the best. So I'll recommend to you, rather than speaking at great length on all these things, a couple months ago in February we had a thing like this kind of at Carlson, and I put together faculty unionization FAQ, frequently asked questions, and you can find a link to it at the bottom of my website. It describes sort of how I think about a lot of these things, and so I'll just offload that and you can investigate it in detail if you want.
Aaron, would you be okay with us having the Daily post that on the...
That's
I
fine,
think
yeah.
it actually already might be posted.
Okay.
I don't know if it's posted, but you're welcome to. Sure.
Thank you.
So, I think things that commonly change are the governance process itself. So you go from a world in which you can write legally enforceable contracts, and the administration can't just blow off faculty things or change course as they want. There's economic consequences, there's political consequences if they do that now, but this would create a legally binding contract that couldn't be unilaterally changed. That's the main difference. Everything else is sort of up to the parties to decide what are our priorities, what are the mutually beneficial deals that we can come up with, how do we make things better, how do we balance these interests, the best way that we as a community see fit.
So I think we're going to come to Joel's question. We're holding that for a moment, but I guess wanted to ask, again, going through several of the panelists, Rob and Mary, and then whoever else wants to jump in, with your respective peer group in mind, do you think, say, graduate student, PNA, professor, whatever, individual who was contemplating coming to the University of Minnesota would be more or less likely to come if they knew we had a faculty union?
I think they would be more likely to come here if there was a faculty union. I don't think anyone wants to come to a new job and expose themselves to instability. I think most people want to work in a place where there's collegiality, and if it has to be legally enforced, well, that's how it might have to be. I think
Great.
It's a positive.
Great. Rob, for grad students, do you think they're thinking about that at all?
I don't know in terms of when graduate students are coming here, accepting a grad school. I don't know if that's the top of their list. But I would suggest, getting back to one of the points that Mary made earlier about, a union providing a sense of stability, right? So it's not just year to year to year. And I think that, that sense of stability is really important, and it would be important to graduate students as well. Because if you come to a place and you want to work with somebody, and you know that they have a union there, then perhaps that person might be happier where they are and less likely to leave. But I mean, that's a ton of speculation, right? But I mean, that's what you're doing ultimately when you pick a graduate school anyway. So, so I think on balance, it would, a union would encourage more graduate students to come if they were choosing between this school and that, or, here and somewhere else. And they saw that sense of stability. I mean, I think we live in a time right now that, with things that have happened in other states and where graduate students are becoming very cognizant of some of the issues that a union seeks to address, right, like in Wisconsin and other places. And so, especially for future faculty. So I think it would have a net positive effect, or net positive, more graduate students.
Suman.
In the terms of how it might appeal to faculty, I think the key is if a union contract were to bring more resources to the faculty, it would in general be attractive, and it would be a great recruitment tool. There are studies like this one that the Daily mentioned. Someone who was it? Brian Edwards actually mentioned that produced by Stephen Katsinas in higher education and political science at University of Alabama, looked at the compensation of 138,000 faculty members at nearly 400 colleges around the country, and showed that 63% of those employees worked at universities with collective bargaining, that those universities with collective bargaining, all three groups received higher average pay. This is, if that's the case, I think it would be, a powerful recruiting tool. I often think of a story of one of my good friends who teaches at Temple University, who has who they have a faculty union contract and a good union that they've been able to protect the rights and interests of faculty. And he was recruited one year at the University of Indiana, or Indiana University in Bloomington. It was a prestigious position, in my field, one of the most prestigious ones. And then when he had gotten the position and they tried to negotiate with him, they actually couldn't afford to bring him to Indiana because his faculty contract had actually, basically moved them out of his the pay scale that they could afford to bring him at. So he stayed. So I don't know. I mean, I think at that level, it depends. And the one thing that I find difficult about this is that, the sort of studies on unionization seem to vary quite a bit, and I think they're really shaped by the political biases of the people making them. So I don't know exactly how to kind of evaluate this work. Similarly to the way I'm not sure how to evaluate Professor Waldfeld's or Joel's study. So I don't know. It'd be useful for us maybe at some point to be able to react to some of the things that the other panelists have said and other questions.
So Joel and Aaron, if you want to get in on this question, let me know. Otherwise, I have a couple that I'm going to, yes.
I would. So that study you mentioned, I read it today. The Chronicle of Higher Ed is enthusiastic about it. But if you read it, what it shows you is that there are differences across states. And some states allow collective bargaining, others do not. And as it happens, the states in which it's collective bargaining is feasible are states in which the university salaries are higher. But really, by the standards of contemporary social science, there's nothing like evidence for an impact of unionization on anything. I mean, unfortunately, that's just not a credible study. And I think the studies that I do agree that sometimes studies have political biases.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I think Aaron and I agree. I mean, and not that we're that far apart to begin with. The study that I think Aaron and I were chatting about this before, that we agree seems to be the most careful and believable study of the impact of unionization on salaries, finds no impact. Now, it does, if you kind of do it wrong, that is, if you look across states or something, you seem to see an impact. If you look at variation over time, however, you don't see. So at best, what one could say is there's no evidence for an impact of unionization on pay, on the average pay at universities. And that's in pretty stark contrast with what the literature on unionization in the private sector shows. There are impacts there. So it's not that one cannot find it or a political agenda hides it. It's just when it's there, you can find it if you do it carefully, and when it's not there, you cannot. But again, there are distributional consequences.
I'll say that as somebody who tries to do this as the core of my research, it's quite hard. It's quite hard to do, to come up with a credible estimate of these things. But I share the sense that the best evidence we have says there's not much of an effect on average faculty salary. There are evidence from outside of faculty unions, other unions, about these distributional impacts that we spoke of. I think there's a lot of variation. You can certainly point to places where there were big increases at some points, and you can point to other places where there weren't. But it's a tough econometric, causal inference question. I'll stop there.
Can I make just one quickie on the topic we were discussing? The question, that has been posed to a number of us is, well, suppose we were to unionize tomorrow, what would it do to, for example, to the attractiveness of us to grad students or to various different constituencies? Economists are unpopular at cocktail parties because we say things like, in the long run, we're all dead. I think the really important issue here is what happens in the long run. And, of course, not for the people who have to eat today, and I have an enormous amount of sympathy for anybody who's having trouble with that, and I'm not joking, I'm serious. But I think if you think about the fragility of a research university, and the way a big organization works is you make decisions, little decisions here and there, and over time, if you make the right ones, things work well. If you make the wrong ones, it takes a while, but eventually you're really in trouble. And so the question is not if we were to change things tomorrow, would people come here tomorrow? The question is if we were to change things tomorrow, how would we be in 20 or 40 or 100 years? That to me is the question. Now, I don't dismiss, I'm glad to finally hear some articulation of the specific concerns of the non-tenure track tenure faculty. I think, to me, I don't run the place, but I would take those seriously and figure out something to do about those. Because there are probably a bunch of things that are not expensive relative to, budgets that would make people's lives a lot better. So, but I'm not, it's not my job to fix. But it seems like rather different problems than the other problems. And moreover, it seems like there's a risk of messing up something big to solve a specific, important, but different problem.
I would just add to that, if I could, that if you don't unionize, there's also some predictions you can make. If you look at other places around the country, there are risks to take that if we don't unionize, we're going to face. Just like if we unionize, we'll face risks as well.
And just one more point that regardless, I guess, of what the averages are in terms of how salaries may or may not be affected by a union contract, I think it's also the case that if the faculty were presented with a contract that didn't look satisfactory to us, I don't think the faculty would vote for it. Honestly, we'd be paying a certain amount in dues. There are other, sort of elements to the contract that would have to look, I think, satisfactory to the faculty. And I think one of those would be, some kind of measurable salary increase, in which case, if it were not available, I think the faculty would vote it down.
Can I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
So something that I think a lot of people don't understand about unions that Sumanth just pointed out is, so there's a vote on whether the workers want to have a union represent them and want to start a collective bargaining relationship rather than sort of the status quo individual bargaining. And majority rules. And if a majority support it, then the union's certified as the bargaining agent, and they start bargaining collectively, and they try to come to an agreement. The administration has no obligation to come to an agreement with the union. They just have a duty to bargain in good faith. That might produce a tentative contract proposal. Maybe, the parties would try to find these low-cost, high-benefit changes to personnel policy that would make people happy and not cost a lot. And the process of bargaining is all about trying to find those mutually enhancing, it's a balance. It's part of it is let's make the pie bigger, let's improve efficiency and find ways to make everyone better off without making anyone worse off. And some of it's distributional. Some of it is really zero sum, like I want a bigger slice of the pie. And there's a lot of variation in how collective bargaining is done. There's a lot of variation in the individual leadership in different places on both sides of the table that leads to sort of more or less productive relationships. But let's say we get a tentative contract here, then the faculty would vote again, and a majority rules, it only goes into effect if a majority support it. And every time a new contract comes up, it's a democratic process. It's a political process. You know, the faculty vote yes or no. The faculty vote for their representatives on the bargaining committee. The faculty vote for their representatives in the union leadership. The faculty vote on any dues levels, on changes, or the union does. And, you know, so that's what unions are. I teach these class to a lot of sort of business school students, future HR managers. A lot of people just don't know much about unions and what the process is and how it works. So I'm just trying to put some really basic stuff out. So I hope that's
Thanks.
useful.
So we have two kind of big questions we're going to get to. One is on governance. Before we get to that, I want to get this other question. Then we're going to open it up to the audience. So if you want to be sort of thinking ahead, that's the plan for right now. So several questions came in that kind of coalesce around some of the potential negative aspects of a unionization. And I'm going to read how we summarize them. Again, these were from probably a half a dozen people or more. The ultimate leverage a union has, whether this is true or not, is a strike by its workers. If faculty were to go on strike, could this impede the timely graduation of students or violate the terms of research grants, contracts? What other leverage would a faculty union hold? And along with that, I'm going to jam these two together. Do unions invariably create a confrontational or adversarial relationship between labor and management, between the faculty and the administration, say? So we're just going to, I think we'll start the way we've been going, and we'll just go on the table. So, Sumant, do you want to?
Maybe start that end.
Okay, we'll start at the other end. Is that okay? Joel, we'll start with you.
That's fine to start. I have nothing intelligent to say about that, or nothing informed.
So I'll just reiterate that a lot does depend on the people involved, and sometimes you find unionized workplaces where the relationship is very amicable, very positive, very productive. Sometimes you find unionized relationships where it's very unproductive, very corrosive, very awful for everyone. And a lot, you know, in some workplaces, unionization, I think, leads to increases in productivity. I think there's good evidence of this. In other places, it leads to falls in productivity. So, it's up to the parties involved to make wise choices or not. What was the first question?
The question about the strike and whether the students wouldn't be able to get their diplomas or...
It could certainly happen, yeah. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Yeah, it could happen.
So I'm a Scottish expat, and they had the vote to remove themselves from the UK, which failed, and it failed by in a kind of a sweet spot. People talked about it was close enough to how the English worried, no offense intended, but far enough away that people didn't feel like their neighbor personally was responsible for them having their ambitions toward it. So you said it earlier on that, if the union vote fails, well, then it's status quo, but there is a potential for some hurt feelings and a disruption to the campus climate. And I don't know whether it's gross speculation on the one hand, but does your research address that?
Yeah, I can tell you something relevant to that, which is I did a study about the effects of teacher unionization in charter schools in California. We looked at, what happens to student achievement after teachers in a charter school unionize compared to how they were doing before, and comparing changes in schools that unionized to changes in schools that didn't unionize over the same time period. And what we found was an immediate, the main effect was in the year of unionization, there was a fall in student achievement. And there's three basic interpretations. One is teaching quality was deteriorating, and these bad teachers were seeking job protection in a union. Second possibility, management quality was deteriorating, and the teachers were seeking to reassert professional control over the institution to try to push back. Third interpretation, unionization is like very disruptive, and people get very heated and lose their minds, and everyone stops doing their work and starts arguing and debating and stops paying attention to the kids. These have different predictions about what's going to happen after the unionization process passes. And what we see is that, at least in these, looking at the universe of charter schools in California, what happened was that student achievement returned back to prior trend. And so basically it looked like sort of a temporary disruption. So the unionization process itself can definitely be disruptive. So that's the best evidence I know of. And hopefully, I appreciate this forum, that we can speak as colleagues and share ideas and information. And I think I have a lot of faith in the institution that we can conduct ourselves in reasonable ways.
Great. Rob, do you have anything to add about this?
I mean, I have no idea what it would happen if you can strike or what, but I guess just the one point that I would add is that in terms of whether or not this would create an adversarial relationship, I mean, there are sometimes positives to adversarial relationships, like where your position is and where the other side's position is, and I don't know that that's not always clear when you don't have that relationship. And that's kind of been, I think, my experience in student government. So, that's an adversarial relationship is not always the worst.
I would agree with that. I think there's a lot of room for creative tension around certain adversarial conversations that are going to come up when we start shaping. I think that's essential, though, to the process. And just the answer to the strike question, it's a very serious thing to do, to go on strike. A good union is going to handle that prior. There's going to be better negotiation before that even comes to be a reality.
Yeah, just to maybe frame the discussion slightly differently, it does feel sometimes that conversations around what unions are or what they aren't sort of pictures them as kind of a static process, or that there is and I think the sort of details, the devil in some ways is in the details that Aaron discussed. That is to say, if we're actually involved in a unionization campaign, then it's incumbent upon us to do it in the best way possible, to do it in a way that doesn't unnecessarily antagonize our colleagues, but on the other hand, gives us a possibility to talk with people and have these open conversations in a way that basically raise issues that don't come up otherwise in our daily lives. And so there are examples, of course, where and relating this to the strike situation, there are examples in which, strike votes do take place, and when they are successful, highly successful, as is in the case of the 97% strike vote on the faculty of the California Faculty Association in the Cal State system that just happened last fall, that very negotiating power of the vote actually allowed the faculty not to have to strike. And so I think the lesson there is that it's important for us to be involved in a process and thinking through these things carefully with each other, and that if we're doing it in a relatively, collectively, not necessarily unified, but in a way that in which we're in conversation with one another, working through these things together, I think it actually will change the nature of the process. So I think that's one element I think to keep in mind.
Thanks. Okay, so again, we're going to go to the audience in just a moment, but I had one more question. Again, we summarized a number of people's input. What potential challenges or opportunities does a change to the university's governance structure present? In other words, if it unionizes, and we tried to get other expertise on our panel and failed, but there was a dramatic change in the composition of the Faculty University Senate when they unionized up at Duluth, and just wondering if anybody on the panel has thoughts that they want to share.
So I think it's up to the faculty and the administration to make those decisions. I don't think anything is ruled out or forced in other than a collective bargaining process. I think if you look around the country, and again, I'll point you guys to my FAQ. I put up there links to a bunch of unionized universities, and you can go to the HR department, the administration's website. You can go to the union website at each of these places. You can look at Duluth, you can look at Crookston, you can look at other unionized places. Many things are possible. You can see all these things.
Yeah, just to speak a little bit to that. There are plenty of examples of major universities across the country, including the SUNY system, Rutgers and Florida State, and now University of Oregon, that have maintained both collective bargaining and formal Senate systems. I would think what we would want to do would be to, if we were to do this, to put the Senate in the contract and basically make it a part of the way that it works, so that actually then the Senate would work productively, in tandem with the negotiations over a contract.
I mean, I can tell you that coming from as a chair of the Student Senate Consultative Committee, this is one of the worries that I have, right? Is what is the shape of this, of shared governance, or, of the Senate, basically, if the faculty were to unionize? Because, it's not untrue to say that some of our most successful efforts, or more successful efforts historically, have been when we worked with the FCC or the Faculty Senate. And so without having that partner, depending on, again, what the union would look like and the contract and all that, that's something that students worry about, right? And so, I mean, we would be very interested, or I personally at least, would be very interested in what role then the Senate or the share, where that would come into play.
And I just would add that that's part of the beauty of creating a contract, is that you can do what you want. You can create a contract that works for your chapter. So if you want the Senate in the contract, you can do that.
Yeah, no, I just like to make an observation about sort of the things we've been talking about recently. I mean, the notion, we've heard the notion that what we do here is work in exchange for money, and of course there's some truth to that. But that's a much better conception of teaching than it is of the rest of what tenure and tenure-track faculty do. The notion of striking, well, what does it mean to strike? After all, as independent research, as faculty members who are doing research out of some combination of obsession and love, what would it mean to be on strike? I think the notion of striking, this just brings into sharp conception, I think, or sharp relief, the distinction between the concerns of one set of employees of the university and a different set who have, again, I think, rather different concerns. And even just the conceptions of these kinds of activities, whether they're kind of work for money or something else, points that out.
So we will open it up for some crowd questions. Anyone who would like to, I think it might make most sense to get in line behind the microphones. We ask that you keep your question to a minute or less, I think, for brevity. We might start at this mic because there's...
So Joe Constant, faculty member from Computer Science and Engineering, and I guess the question I want to ask you is about, the nuclear arsenal. It's good to have it if you need it, and if you ever use it, you're sort of screwed. And I was here for our last 692 to 666 vote, and I wonder to what extent is the right outcome for all of this to have a strong enough vote that the serious issues are paid attention to, whether that's multi-year contracts and salaries and other things, but without using up all your powder, because once you're in a situation where the union is in place, you have no leverage left. And what's been the experience of other places when once that leverage is gone, there's not as much you can do short of a strike?
We're just going to let the panelists have a free-for-all of these questions, or whoever wants to get in, please feel free to do so.
And I think we'd also like to note that there very definitely might be questions that are unanswerable today or unanswerable by this panel. So panelists, do your best, but certainly there might be questions that we just cannot provide the answers to today.
So is your question what to do if you join the union and then you don't get...
Would we be better off if we got close, but we didn't get there? So that we sent a strong message, but we didn't use up our one shot?
Do you think we're better off than we were in 1997? I don't.
I'm not sure the premise, I'm not sure I agree with the premise, which is that if you unionize, then you've given up all your leverage. I mean, a different conception would be that if you unionize, then you've created more leverage. But, people can have different views on this stuff, so I'm not sure. Yeah.
Can I jump in? So one thing that it would be sad, I think, if unionization were to fail and nothing were done to address some real concerns of some of the members of the community. So I think there's something very appealing about your suggestion that might be regardless of how this comes out, there could be some good news for people who need good news. I mean, that would be an optimistic, that would make me happy.
Sumant?
Sure. I guess the only other, I mean, I would be happy if there were good news all around. That's, I'm all for good news. I guess the thing that I'm wondering about in terms of the sort of leverage question is that once one has a union in place, one has support staff, political connections, and a sort of infrastructure in place to actually give oneself, the power to negotiate that isn't only bound up with, the vote over a union or not. You're right that the striking and a strike vote is a part of that calculus for sure, but it's not the only thing. And many faculty unions exist to this day and continue to kind of, on the process of getting new contracts, for the most part, not striking, and improving the conditions of the faculty and the sort of community around them. I mean, I think it's worth noting that it's not impossible to get, by any means, to get rid of a union. One can, hold a vote. It takes 30% of the units to basically propose to get rid of it. And unions and faculty unions have not, been eliminated in that sense. And I think I wager to say, on average, faculty probably think it's better to have one than not when they have it.
So it takes 30% to file a petition
Yes,
for decertification. Right. There's like a symmetric process, and then a 50% vote.
Yeah, vote, right.
Again, to decertify. Yeah.
Okay, and we ask that you identify yourself before you ask your question.
Sure. Michael Goldman, professor in sociology and global studies. There's a lot of hypothetical discussion up here, and I'm confused. And on the other hand, I also feel that, using the nuclear analogy to unionization is kind of bizarre. But I think that Joel's distinction between the noble and the practical is really a disingenuous kind of distinction here. I think the reason why people are for a union are for reasons why people are for equity and justice. And when they see injustice and inequity on campus, we wonder why can't we change it, and what is the process by which we can change it. I don't see unions as a boogeyman, which seems to be the underlying concern here, like what if, as if there's something perilous there. I think what's perilous is the kind of inequities that exist on campus. So my question is, well, it would be nice if we had a chart to show us, to demonstrate the percentage of the population on campus who make $14,000, like our graduate students. Now, I know some parts of campus they make much more, but mine don't. What are the salaries in humanities? Is that a living wage? For the staff who work hard night and day, they're making $25,000 to $40,000. Is that fair? Now, I think that's the question that we need to be asking, and then understand how do we rectify these inequities that we mask. And I think there's no such thing as an average salary. Nobody lives on an average salary. Some people, the majority of people on campus live on a perilous salary. Now, of course, the people who are against the unions, I mean, starting salaries in some departments are higher than the highest salary in my department. So there are inequities. It would be a nice way to start a conversation of panelists to show those inequities, and then ask the audience and yourselves, is it worth trying to change these inequities, or are we afraid that someone from Yale or Wharton might not come because of the kind of threat that we would seek justice or equity at this university? I think these are the kind of the questions I'm hoping that you guys can talk about. Thanks.
Thank you for the comment. On the disingenuousness and so forth. I mean, so I agree with you. I mean, so my father was an art historian, low-paid department at the University of Minnesota, especially after the inflation of the 70s. And I grew up at dinner table conversations about the inequity and the unfairness of of different pay in different departments. I became an economist perhaps as a reaction against that. I mean, as I say, economists aren't popular at parties because they tell you things like, well, prices get determined in markets, and sometimes you're not happy with prices. And I don't mean to be glib. I mean, I think there's a lot of inequality in the world economy and the U.S. economy. Far less at the University of Minnesota than in the U.S. in general. Doesn't mean we shouldn't worry about it. But I don't think we can solve the world's inequality problems with the wage policy of the University of Minnesota, because we do participate in a market, and we do run the risk of losing faculty whom we'd like to hang on to. So let's solve the problems as much as to the extent that we can, but let's not forget that we work in markets, and we cannot just, plug the dike with a finger. I mean, I'm sorry to be the bad news bearer as the economist, but I think that those are just features of the way economies work.
From an economist's perspective.
Pardon me?
From an economist's perspective.
I didn't say that it's the way I wish it worked. What I'm saying is it's the way it does work. And I'm happy to talk to you. Let's have lunch. It's on me.
So, Messing from mathematics. I disagree strongly with a comment that was made by Joel earlier, namely that the administration is a stakeholder at the University of Minnesota. This is, in my view, one of the genuine problems with the University of Minnesota. The students, the staff, including those who clean the toilets, the teachers, whether they be contract employees or tenure and tenure-track faculty, they are the ones with the genuine stakeholder aspect to their relationship with the university. The next thing I would say is there are currently 1,600 tenure and tenure-track faculty members at the University of Minnesota, 1,200 contractual employees. That number, the 1,200, has been growing much, much more rapidly than the number of tenure and tenure-track faculty. The reason for this is because the contractual people can be given yellow dog contracts. That's a technical term which I recommend you look up. They can be treated like dirt, and that is just not the way to treat anyone.
Mr. Messing, I'm sorry to interrupt, but sorry, Professor Messing, if you have a question.
My question is, why hasn't the University of Minnesota faculty done something to change the structure of the university a long time ago so that Morrill Hall does the faculty's bidding rather than the other way around?
Any takers?
Okay.
Oh, I just want to say it was not I who said that. So
That was me.
So my name is Ellen McGrattan. My name is Ellen McGrattan, and I was one of those Unit 11 people for 20 years. Now I'm a professor here. But my question is, or actually my remark, it would be nice if Joel could, I've seen him give his scholarly work on the unions, talking about the University of Washington case, but he didn't say anything about the stuff he's found out from looking at the people who were signers of the letter in support of the union versus the rest of the faculty. And it would be nice to just have a few remarks about those findings.
So in Minnesota, there isn't an open letter in opposition to unionization. It's just an open letter in support. So from the standpoint of scholarly, of research, I'm not trying to make a judgment about it. So there's not as much one can say, but many of the patterns are the same. That is, there's more enthusiasm or greater tendency to sign the open letter in favor of unionization at Minnesota among the faculty who are less engaged in research activity. It's essentially the same pattern. It's in as much as one can say with less data, there's basically no difference.
Can I ask just Joel a question about his study? Because what's the measure of productivity that you use?
I have a couple. So one I have is the ISI measure, which has the nice feature that it's available for lots of people. But what I would call productivity or research in the study is not just absolute number, but absolute number in comparison with folks in one's same department. Okay, so the other is Google Scholar citations, and again, the same notion. Now that one is interestingly it's only available for folks who register, so it's less commonly available, so it's available for fewer people, but it's in some ways a nice measure. But there again, the question is, how many Google Scholar citations do you have compared to other folks in your department, other folks in at your rank, and so forth?
And how does the ISI measure work? Could you give a little more detail?
Pardon me?
Could you give a little more detail about how the ISI measure works?
Sure, it's the number of publications in ISI-listed outlets for the ISI measure.
It's the thing that sort of concerns me about it is that sometimes absolute number doesn't necessarily correlate with prestige in a field or
that's why
status.
It's relative to the number in your field.
No, but I'm saying within your field. Like there are plenty of scholars within a field who may publish a certain amount, and it's the quality of the publication actually often determines the prestige of their position.
No, I mean, I entirely agree. Yeah. Bibliometric measures are kind of hogwash at the micro level, but you kind of average across stuff and you hope to get something good. I mean, Google Scholar citations measure impact in some sense. Of course, we know some survey articles get cited a lot, even though there's nothing new there, and some books are nothing, and some articles. But I think there is a whole industry of bibliometrics, and I think that what folks tend to believe is that there is some meaning to if you look across large numbers of things, you can learn something, even though for any particular person, we wouldn't want to devolve the tenure process to bibliometric measures, even though some try to. So I agree.
On to the next question.
Yeah, my name's Chris Phelan. I'm in economics. Aaron, I've been spending my time here looking at your really excellent, it's at the bottom of your webpage. It's your FAQ. You held it up. I'm going to give two facts, and I want to know people's comments on whether these are fair to say. I think the first is a question of judgment. The second is inarguable. The R1 research universities where the tenured and tenure-track faculty are represented by a union. There is a small handful, and they're all worse than we are. The highest ranked one would be Rutgers. But Berkeley is not, that bastion of right-wingism, Berkeley, is not represented by, tenure-track faculty members not represented by a union. Michigan, another right-wing hotbed, not represented by a faculty union. Every single one is worse than us. And even the handful that are represented by a faculty union, not a single one is represented by this union. Is that the highest rank? There is not a single Tier 1 R1 research university that's represented where the tenured and tenure-track faculty are represented by this union?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Next question.
I think one small thing. I think Joel mentioned earlier that none of the four-year, SEIU didn't represent anyone at a four-year school. Is that right? I think Cal State system is SEIU. I think they're four-year, but they're not R1 or highest research productivity.
Can I respond to that quickly? I mean, it's true. I mean, I think SEIU is generally newer to the organizing within higher education than some other unions. I think one of the appealing parts of working with SEIU is that they are a growing union, that they put a lot of effort into actually, adding new members. They have 2 million members, as Joel pointed out. They're a quickly growing and politically powerful union. They have the types of workers that they organize and the kinds of projects that they've been involved in, including very much so the minimum wage campaign, of course, are things that, speak personally to me, and I know a lot of other faculty, but the success that they had have been more recent. And I think while it's true that, they would be, we would be the first sort of big union that they would be represented by, it's also the case that, there are plenty of contracts and other institutions like Rutgers and others to draw from in terms of the wisdom of doing, how a contract would look. And I guess, it presents an opportunity to me rather than necessarily sort of a point of alarm. But
I would certainly, second and encourage everyone to research SEIU, to research, these contracts that exist at other places. And like for some of you, for some of us, it's going to be exciting and you're going to feel really good about it. And for some of us, it's going to turn us off. And like, we're going to see things in these agreements that seem like great models, and we're going to see things in the agreements that look like terrible models. And like, this is, I think, a very important point, that the whole point of this election process, the reason why this is in state law, and it's modeled on private sector unionization law, the reason why we have union elections is that the public sector has taken a stance, it's public policy to encourage collective bargaining where workers want it. And the election process is set up to allow employees to express their preferences. And so like, you should respect this process, and you should make up your own mind about it, and you should do the research to figure out what you think. And what the union wants is legally irrelevant. What the administration wants is legally irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the free and untrammeled preferences of the faculty, of the people in the bargaining unit. So it's incumbent on us to get engaged, and good on you for coming to the forum and thinking about it. And please encourage your colleagues to do so as well.
But I would also like to encourage people to talk to each other about it. There's one of the things I think is unfortunate is that the administration has sent some messages out that have been, complicated to parse, but also encourage, I think, skepticism about the process itself. And I think, we as faculty members should be talking to one another openly, in our department meetings, amongst our own colleagues, and having lunch with each other and chatting about, what this process could look like. And yes, informing ourselves. I think no single person is going to know everything about, how a union could or should work. And it's a space that, has the possibility of invention. A contract is a very flexible entity. And so if one comes up with a new mechanism that would really work for a research one institution like ours, we should of course adopt it. And so that's, I just really want this to be normalized in some way. And the fact that it hasn't been, at least in my impression so far, is I think something we should change.
All right, I'll take the next question. Oh.
Okay. My name is Sonali Pava. I'm an assistant professor in theater, arts, and dance. And my question is around language. We've heard the economists speak about compression, salary compression. We've heard them talk about distribution. And I, as an anthropologist by training, would like to ask about gender equity and race-based equity within disciplines in terms of salaries and terms. We know at our institution and nationally that women in academia make less on the dollar than men for the same job. Faculty of color have less power in individual bargaining than do white male colleagues. So I really wonder if you could speak to what you see as the possibilities of a union to address some of those inequities, not across disciplines, but even within the humanities, within the social sciences, and of course, even within the business school.
Well, something comes to mind. I was on the faculty senate a few years ago when a study was returned, looking carefully at the University of Minnesota salaries. And so this isn't part of my prepared spiel, but there was a study of gender differences in salary, which found, I think, something statistically indistinguishable from zero. And I was sort of shocked because one never sees that. The world is so full of discrimination and so full of inequities. So my takeaway from that was that, at least by the criteria set out by that study, which had been commissioned and done by some University of Wisconsin statistician, that we were doing pretty well. So that doesn't really address your question, but certainly if we had a problem, it should, one would want to solve it. Whether unions would solve it, I don't have any information about that.
I'll just say that I think in general unions advocate for more objective rather than subjective standards. So you get things in public schools like seniority as a basis for promotion or layoff, and that has trade-offs. Like in one sense, it's more fair because everybody can agree and it's clear. But in the other hand, it reduces the ability to rely on human judgment. But maybe that's good, because human judgment is
judgment can
often
be
very
racist and
biased.
sexist, yeah.
Exactly. So it's a double-edged sword. And I think what we know is that unionization often pushes for more explicit objective standards, and then you sort of give up this double-edged sword of subjective judgment or human, less objective things. And if you're interested in this more, in this fact, there's a study by May et al. 2010, Representation of Women Faculty at Public Research Universities, Do Unions Matter? Is sort of the best paper I could find in the literature. They found some evidence that it promoted unionization at public research universities have a higher proportion of women faculty overall at the higher ranks. So, we can go into how good the evidence is. But.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that? Did you want to go?
Oh, go ahead.
Just something that is worth mentioning, I think, is that individual unions have made major efforts to try to address the concerns of faculty of color. The CFA in California has made this a priority, and there's a faculty of color caucus there. And so as a result, they've been able to get things like a council to address affirmative action, or a state budget fight that was won that incorporated language into this year's budget to set aside $11 million in tenure track hiring out of the state budget, and that was something that faculty of color there were very invested in. There's a resolution in support of ethnic studies, and this is there are also funded caucuses for different groups there. There actually is an Asian and Pacific Islander caucus, an African American caucus, a Latina caucus, an LGBT caucus as well. A commitment that the university made to producing faculty that looks like what the state looks like. For example, immigrants make up a quarter of the population, and so on and so forth. So I think that there are, again, one would have to use a unionization drive and then a contract as a mechanism to advocate for the things that we want. And there is an active faculty of color caucus within this particular drive. So that would be something that, obviously we'd hope to address as well. And it's not something that isn't being, entirely unaddressed by the university. The faculty here have pushed for the RIG searches and done all sorts of other organizing, are doing a lot with that. And those efforts, I don't think, are at all, they're consonant with what we're trying to accomplish as well, but hope to expand upon.
We're rapidly running out of time, so I'm afraid we're only going to be able to take one more question.
Hi, Jennifer Gunn from History of Medicine, and this is partially just a fact question, and partially I think it relates to Michael's comment, and I don't think that I heard Joel talk about the disciplinary alignments of the faculty opposing and in favor of the unionization drive at the University of Washington. But so the fact question is, it is still not clear to me whether all tenure and tenure track faculty in the university are involved, or if, as I think I read in the Star Tribune, the medical school and perhaps some other colleges
Law school's out.
are exempted from the drive. And so I just want to get clear about, when we're talking about unifying the faculty, are we talking about the whole faculty, or are there exceptions in the class, as well as the issue yet to be resolved about the contingent faculty and P&A?
So my understanding is that by state law, the academic health center and the law school faculty are out of the bargaining unit, but basically all the other tenure track faculty are in. And then, as you said, there's the status of contingent, or I don't know the right, people argue about the word, but not tenure track staff is in dispute and will be settled by the Bureau of Mediation Services or state administrative processes.
And there actually were...
Oh, sorry, just one really quick amendment to that, not to disagree at all, but just to say that what my study shows is that the composition of the electorate would have an impact on the likely outcome, because I include at the University of Washington not only tenure and tenure track, but also other instructional faculty. And as I say, so the inclusion of them would mean the inclusion of more people favorably inclined toward unionization. So it is a consequential decision that the Bureau of Mediation Services has before it.
But did you also look at the disciplinary?
Yes, I mean, there are tables. I can give you the link. I can tell you by department the preferences.
And just one thing, I do know there was a couple of questions submitted online asking for a brief recap of the AHC's history of the exemption. Is there anyone that can speak very briefly about how that exemption happened?
I don't really know. My impression is that after the last unionization drive, the faculty in those places expressed an interest in being broken out separate, and that then it was codified in state law, but I don't really know.
I think the motivation came more from the law school, and you should ask Fred Morrison in the law school about that.
And we tried to get Fred to come here, and it was unfortunately unable to. I want to. Okay.
Can we get one more? No?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, good. A question for you then. I came from Italy in 1982 because in Italy, academics is a swamp, and Italy is a paradise of equality. Everybody is equal in the academia. Skin color, sex, everything is the same. The only thing that matters are objective factors like seniority. Now, in Italy, there is an attempt now to move away from this model. Who is doing the wrong thing? Aaron, it's for you.
Who is doing the wrong thing?
Yeah, because we seem to be moving toward equality as a value per se, without taking into account the subtle trade-off that we have between equality and academic excellency.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding your question, Aldo.
He's asking a toughie.
Yeah, that's probably why I don't understand.
Okay, do you want me to repeat it? Do you want me to
so
repeat?
let me, are you saying like who?
We have a model.
What's the problem here? Is that your question?
No. We have a model that is based on equality, and we have a model that puts a lot of emphasis on academic excellency. Many of the countries, most of the European countries, that put a lot of emphasis on equality are realizing that is a tragic mistake. Is it clear now?
Yes.
Good.
I'm not sure how to respond. I mean, that's a very fair point, and I think you're right that the European university systems are heavily unionized and are much more, based on these objective factors, which turn out to be just like countable things. And I don't want that for our university.
Then why? Okay.
I told you at the beginning why I think it's a good idea, but I definitely understand and respect, differences of opinion about it. So.
All right. I think we have just run out of time. I would like to emphasize that the Daily is going to keep. We have created a website about this topic that has an FAQ, and we'll continue to take questions. There will likely be new iterations of this event in the future, so please feel free to continue to submit questions. We'll have reporters getting answer to those and potentially another forum.
Now, I did ask you to not applaud during the event, but could I ask you all to please give a round of applause to our panelists? And I want to personally thank Marianne Renaud and the Minnesota Daily for the great support that they've given us.
Thank you all for coming.